Jamie, are you there?
I am. Thank you, Jack, for turning it over to me. I did send out the presentation to Bethany earlier. I'm also going to put it up on the screen so you can all read along as I'm moving. Hopefully you can hear me fine and without any issues. Following on from what Jack had said, predominantly I work actually in the acquired and traumatic brain injury field. So all of those survivors have had near-death experiences and were able to survive the brain injuries and continue on with their lives. But I've integrated hypnosis and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing into the care that I provide, and it's been very, very successful. So hopefully the presentation, which I'm going to be giving, is going to be focused on PTSD, which is often an event for a lot of individuals that do survive near-death experiences. There will be some elements of how hypnosis can help in terms of PTSD. There will also be some past life regression components to how that can also help with near-death experiences and how to process through. And then there will be some elements with eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, also known as EMDR. So I'm going to try and get the presentation up on the screen as a screen share so you can see it if you don't have it already sent to you. Give me 1 second and we'll give that a try. Let's see. Now, can everybody see this? I hope so. Based on my screen, you can all see it.
Yeah.
So
I do not see your.
you're not seeing it?
No,
Okay,
we can't see it.
okay, let me give it a try. It's popping up now.
There we go.
Okay, so now can you see it?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So as I said, it's a presentation in relation to non-traditional support options for near-death survivors, such as yourself. I'll get going with the goals. The presentation goals are to understand the impact of post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD on the brain. I would hope that you can learn how hypnosis can help the brain rewire itself after traumatic events. I'd like you to develop your knowledge of past life regression hypnosis and its potential benefits, and enhance your knowledge concerning eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is commonly known as EMDR. Again, these are going to be tools that you may choose to utilize or recommend to other near-death survivors when they come into your group. The first thing I want to focus on is in terms of PTSD. So approximately 50% of the population will experience a traumatic event, such as a near-death experience at some point in their lives. While reactions to trauma can vary widely from person to person, and not everyone will develop post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma can alter the brain in some predictable ways. With that being said, with trauma, it's all about how you develop an explanatory framework around the trauma, and that if you're successful in developing a framework towards the trauma, typically you're able to move forward without issues within your life. If you don't have that ability, that's where problems can come up. With increased awareness, you can seek treatment to address your PTSD symptoms and learn skills that have potential to assist you to actively rewire your brain for recovery. In addition, having an understanding concerning what is going on internally can be immensely beneficial to your mental and physical well-being. It goes back to the old saying, knowledge is power, and having the knowledge will allow you to control your interpretation of your experience. If you're able to do that, then you're able to move forward successfully. Essentially, you can think of a traumatized brain as one that functions differently because of the traumatic events that it has experienced. And just as your brain changed in response to your past experience with the world, it can also change in response to your future experiences. In other words, the brain is plastic and you can change it. And this is the key to always think, is your brain is plastic and malleable. even with the individuals that I work with in terms of traumatic brain injuries, we rely on their brains being plastic in terms of if there is an area of the brain that is damaged, other areas of the brain have the ability to pick up and take on board the functions that were previously conducted by other areas of the brain. So we rely on that plastic every day to help that individual move forward with their lives. And it's no different for trauma and PTSD. Trauma can alter the brain functions in many ways, but three of the most important changes appear to occur in the following areas. The prefrontal cortex, which I'll be classing as PFC, known as the thinking center, that's just in front or just behind the top of your head where your forehead is. That's the last part of the brain to fully develop. In females, it's normally around the age of 25. In gentlemen, it's normally around the age of 30 to 32. That's why guys are a lot more immature than women typically. This is your higher functioning areas, highbrow thinking, processing, all of this occurs here. Unfortunately, this is typically the area more than likely that gets injured in car accidents, in fights, in falls. It's typically you're falling on that frontal lobe and that prefrontal cortex, and that leads to a lot of issues. The second area is the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, known as the emotional regulation center. That sits just behind the frontal lobe. And the third area is the amygdala, known as the fear center. That's the more ancient structure within the brain. They call it the reptilian brain. It was one of the first areas to develop. So the PFC, or thinking center, as I said, is located directly behind your forehead. It is responsible for abilities including rational thought, problem solving, personality, planning, empathy, and awareness of ourselves and others. When this area of the brain is strong, we think clearly, make good decisions, and we're aware of ourselves and others. The ACC, or emotional regulation center, is located next to the prefrontal cortex, but is at a deeper level within the brain. This area is responsible in part for regulating emotion, and ideally has a close working relationship with the thinking center. When these regions are functioning correctly together, we can manage different thoughts and emotion without being totally overwhelmed by them. Finally, the amygdala, a tiny structure at an even deeper level inside our brain, serves as its fear center. The subcortical area is outside of our conscious awareness or control. Touch, smell, and taste all answer one question: is this a threat? If it detects that a dangerous threat is present, it initiates your fear response. When this area is activated, we feel afraid, reactive, and vigilant. It's also important to remember in regards to this, a lot of the information that the amygdala is processing is subconscious in nature. So we're not even fully aware of the information that we're taking in and processing, but it's always processing information. So it can always influence you. Traumatized brains appear differently from non-traumatized brains in three principal ways. The thinking center is underactivated, which is your frontal lobe. The emotional regulation center is underactivated, and the fear center is overactivated. So the reptilian ancient part of your brain is carrying out the majority of the functions, whereas the pieces of the brain that develop as progressed are not working as they should be. What these differences in function indicate is that often a traumatized brain is bottom heavy, meaning that activations of lower, more primitive areas, including the fear center, are high, while higher areas of the brain, also known as cortical areas, are underactivated. In other words, if you are traumatized, have PTSD symptoms associated with a near-death event that you have not processed through as yet, you may experience chronic stress, vigilance, fear, and irritation. You may also have a hard time feeling safe, calming down, or sleeping. These symptoms are all a result of a hyperactive amygdala. At the same time, individuals who are traumatized may notice difficulties with concentration and attention and often report that they can't think clearly. This is not surprising. It is due to the thinking center being completely underactivated and the amygdala taking control. Survivors of trauma who experience PTSD symptoms will also have the potential to feel incapable of managing their emotions. For example, if somebody spooks them, they may experience rapid heart rate long after, or may have a hard time just letting go of minor annoyances. Even when they want to calm down and feel better, they just cannot. This is in large part due to a weakened emotional regulation system. Again, we go back. If the frontal lobe's not working, if the regulation systems are not working, we're just going off of fight and flight responses. Fight, flight, or freeze, which comes from the amygdala. These troubling symptoms have been broken down into the DSM-5 diagnostic categories below: exposure, intrusion, avoidance, alteration, and arousal. In response to these categories, hypnosis has been found to be effective in the treatment of PTSD due to its ability to go directly to the root of these categories. And what I want to say here is we're going to be talking about hypnosis in the context of PTSD. We're going to be talking about hypnosis in the context of past life regression. And then we're also going to be talking about EMDR. And they all kind of do exactly the same thing, albeit in slightly different ways in terms of helping people move forward from PTSD-based symptoms. So as we're going through the next sections of the presentation, you'll start to see familiarities and links between the different support options that are available, and that they all give the individual the ability to process their trauma. And by giving you the ability to process through your trauma, it enables you to take control of it. It enables the amygdala to let go of it, and it move throughout the brain and be processed by the higher regions of the brain, that frontal lobe. And that's something to remember. There isn't one definitive way of dealing with trauma or dealing with PTSD or dealing with near-death experiences. It's all what works for you, and sometimes it's about exploring the different methods that are out there in order to find the one that works best for you. The next slide. So hypnosis can be focused to tackle the following components of PTSD. Exposure. For individuals who experience a traumatic event such as an NDE or a prolonged series of traumatic events such as ongoing psychological, physical, and/or sexual abuse as a child or adult, trauma changes their perceptual experience of the world around them. The limbic system is designed to respond to a threat or an attack in one of the following ways: flight, fight, or freeze. We often forget about the freeze. Trauma imprints upon the brain and body in such a way that an individual continues to live as though the trauma is happening in the present. So how does hypnosis help this? Hypnosis cannot erase traumatic events, but it can directly address the event and their effects. So if you ever go to see a hypnotist and they can completely erase or wipe out a memory, they're lying to you. You should probably leave them as quickly as possible without paying them a penny. Hypnosis has the potential to enable an individual to access information that is stored in their physical bodies and their subconscious mind. The actual traumatic event can then be examined. The wide array of emotions surrounding it can be claimed, processed, and expressed. Any negative conclusions or beliefs that have often directly contributed to the lifelong behavioral patterns can be released and transformed. And this is what I'm saying. It's all about enabling the individual who is struggling from the PTSD to go and to explore that event in a safe and controlled way. If they're able to do that, they're then able to process it. And this is the important part that I'll keep going back on. It's all about taking control of the processing of the event. If you control it, you can own it, and you can assist yourself to move forward from it. Intrusion. As mentioned, trauma has the potential to impact the brain and body in numerous ways. Nightmares, flashbacks, distressing memories, and reactivity to cues or reminders of the event are the most common ways in which trauma interrupts daily life. Most individuals experiencing intrusive symptoms often feel a total lack of control over their minds and bodies, as though the trauma has hijacked their own sense of agency and free will. How does hypnosis help? In a hypnosis session, the individual is provided multiple tools, resources, and opportunities to take back a sense of control. One method, called ego strengthening, employs a variety of techniques to help an individual to make direct contact to the parts of themselves that are strong, wise, and brave. In this, overall, we all have architectural components of our personalities that can be called upon. And one technique that I use, it's almost like we're in a room, and I have you project out that room, and those architectural components of the psyche then take over. You have your healer, you have your guardian, you have these different elements that can be called upon in a hypnosis session to work together to help the individual move forward. By doing this and providing a physical anchor to lock in the resource via mind-body connection, an individual gradually remembers and reclaims their own agency. They are reminded of their own strengths and virtues, which is incredibly healing. And this is an important part because, again, it's about giving you back control. It's about giving you those architectural components of your psyche and getting you to interact with them in a way that helps you process through the trauma in a safe and effective manner. Another useful component of hypnosis is teaching an individual ways in which they can modulate their own psychological reactivity. In terms of that, it's giving you back free will. It's not allowing you to feel completely hijacked by intrusive symptoms. This is often done during trance. It's a very safe form of relaxation. You typically put yourself in trance multiple times across the course of the day and don't even realize it. Some of the scariest points of trance are if you do the same journey over and over and over again. Sometimes you get in your car in the morning and then you get to the location and you don't remember the journey that you've taken. That's a form of trance. It's a form of self-hypnosis. If you're reading a good book and you get completely lost in the book and then you look down at your clock, an hour or two has gone. It's a form of trance. So it's nothing that you haven't done to yourself before. It's just a guided and deeper version of that. We can also teach the individual how to titrate their shock system in a regular session. And what that means is if somebody does begin to start to feel the physiological reactions associated with shock, we can work with the individual to teach them a better way of controlling that through hypnosis, anchoring those control elements in. So when those feelings start to come up, you have a system in place in order to reduce them back down again consciously. That's the important part. It's bringing everything into conscious awareness. Avoidance. As can be expected, a victim of trauma will do what it takes to avoid a reoccurrence of the feeling associated with their trauma. Many avoidance symptoms can result from conscious choice, avoiding people or places, for instance, where the near-death experience happened. But individuals also avoid via dissociation, substances or substance abuse, or addictive behaviors. The latter are far less conscious, but no less purposeful. The purpose of avoidance is to attempt to distance oneself from the trauma. But when trauma is rooted in the brain and body, what results is a fragmented sense of self. Avoidance precludes connection. Thus, it can be months or years later, individuals continue to feel detached, numb, or stuck. How does hypnosis help this? One of the goals of hypnosis is restoration of the self, the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual parts of the individual to be unified, balanced, and whole. From this place, healthy connections can be born. Hypnosis has the potential to provide a voice to the lost parts of the self, the parts that were hidden away or shrouded in negativity to survive. Again, we go back to that room with those different archetypal characters that you have within your psyche. We may work to bring those together. Several types of regression can be successfully used to help an individual process all manner of traumatic memories. The hypnotist can use creativity and imagination to help the individual work through the past event, but this time with the resources they did not happen to have at the time of the original event. So essentially, I can take you back to the event, but have the outcome of the event change. I can also have you go back to that event, and it can be sometimes as simple as removing the color from your memory, or removing the sounds from your memory, or turning the sounds down, or adjusting the sounds to have you process it and process it through in a more appropriate manner. Again, when this work is done in trance, it changes the way the memory is stored and the way it functions in the body and mind. And if I can take a traumatic event, reduce down the trauma so you feel that you're in control, that event is no longer needed to be avoided because you've got control of it. It's something very, very simple when I break it down this way. In terms of the session, it's going to be, or it should be, every session that you go to a hypnotist in terms of trauma, they all need to be customized to your specific needs. There is no cookie cutter way of dealing with PTSD. And anybody that attempts to provide support for PTSD in terms of hypnosis or EMDR, or even I would say past life regression, in a cookie cutter manner or as a group, they're not doing it the correct way. And this is the key, because if you use these methods, you no longer are going to be held hostage by those memories, whether they be mental or physical. Alteration, trauma changes us. It alters our personality, mood, memory, motivation, cognitive function, and perception. By extension, it changes relationships, families, and systems. During a traumatic event, not only are sensory perceptions altered and any previous sense of safety forever changed, but a victim of trauma displays notable shifts in the conclusions they draw. They form new negative conclusions about themselves. I deserved it. I'm bad. I shouldn't have been there. My body is not my own. It was my fault. These are all common negative beliefs that are held and internalized, and they take over the way that we interpret information. They also form negative conclusions about other people in the world in general. The world is a scary place. People are evil. Men are dangerous. Trust is foolish. And with these beliefs, we then push them out for all incoming information that we take on. And if you think about it, if we have these beliefs running through our head, and then we're only really processing in that bottom-up approach with the amygdala taking over control, you're constantly going to be in a fight, flight, or freeze state. You're going to be in hyper-awareness and completely stressed out every day, every minute, every hour. So how does hypnosis help this? Hypnosis opens a gateway to the subconscious. With a skilled hypnotist, individuals can access the pivotal events surrounding their trauma during carefully and modulated regression. In trance, they clearly experience the moments in which their conclusions turn negative. Individuals then begin to change those distorted beliefs and reclaim what was lost. A negative conclusion such as I am bad is then replaced with I am good or I am lovable, for instance. And this is important because it's all about taking that negative belief and flipping it to a positive belief about the self. And sometimes it's just as simple, it's like a light switch reaction. If you challenge the negative belief in the right way, and in this, in terms of hypnosis, you get to re-examine the events that occurred, you can help that individual truly flick that switch, develop that new positive belief, and that enables them to begin to move forward, begin to interpret information in a new way. Arousal, lastly, a history of trauma, particularly when it goes untreated, results in marked behavioral and functional changes. Trauma that is stuck in the body will inevitably try to work its way out. This can manifest in chronic shock, somatic or physical illness, or arousal symptoms such as hypervigilance, exaggerated startles, or problems sleeping and concentrating. Recklessness or high-risk behaviors could be another way that arousal manifests itself in this behavior. How does hypnosis help? A major component of healing trauma is providing individuals the ability to complete the actions that they were not able to do when their trauma originally occurred. Trauma can be rooted in the body, in the paralysis and the inability to take action that results from the freeze response. So what we look to do is potentially have you play out in your mind the event to a conclusion that is more positive, seeing you react in a different way. So the freeze disappears, what you would have done. And that can be done in a very, very subtle way. It can be while you're in a state of hypnosis and trance. I take you to a movie theater in your mind, and we play out the scene of the trauma, but I also help you to an extent controlled dissociation to create the separation that you need to be able to play through that event again in that controlled manner. It is useful to look at arousal symptoms as a way in which the body is trying to heal, trying to get our attention. Alternatively, arousal symptoms reflect the stuck trauma response, fight, flight, or freeze. Again, we say that the trauma can be stuck in the limbic system. The healing of trauma cannot be complete without allowing the body to move. Part of the role of a hypnotist is to assist the individual to unfreeze, usher their emotions and thoughts into conscious awareness, process them, and release them. And this is the piece with hypnosis. If you go to a certified hypnotist who is trained specifically in trauma and PTSD, and this is another point that I want to make. This isn't a run-of-the-mill hypnotist or hypnosis style. This isn't jump online and find the first hypnotist that you can find. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there that say they can do many, many things, and this is not the case with trauma. Trauma is a very specialized subject that needs to be approached carefully. As I'm saying, there are elements in the healing of trauma, especially where hypnosis is concerned, where you have to be guided through. To be guided through, you need somebody who's an experienced guide. Because if we're dealing with things such as dissociation, different elements like that, this is not something for the layperson. I'd always recommend researching the hypnotist, making sure they're affiliated with a reputable organization such as the National Guild of Hypnotists, to ensure that they're doing the right thing. And you should also be empowered to ask questions to know that they've got the right experience. You don't want people rummaging around in your brain who don't know what they're doing. In hypnosis, we encourage individuals to move their bodies to strike out. What movement, what reflex was their body unable to do in that moment of helplessness? In trance, the individual is provided with a corrective experience. They can hit the perpetrator, scream out loud, say no, run away, defend themselves, push away a weapon, break out of a trap, tell a trusted person what happened. And this is what I say, we can go back to that idea of the movie theater, where you're sitting there and dissociating from the actual images and events in a very controlled manner. And you can play these out on a movie screen in your mind while being instructed by the hypnotist in the best and safe way to do this. This additional corrective experience can be monumental in helping a traumatized individual release the past and move forward in their life. Again, if you've not processed something, if it's been stuck in your amygdala, in that subconscious part of your brain, it's impacting you each and every day. But because it's not moved beyond the reptilian end of the brain, you've not brought it into awareness. If you haven't brought it into awareness in those higher functioning parts of the brain, you're never going to be able to process it through. And because of that, this is where hypnosis, EMDR, and even past life regression has the ability to help that processing occur. Next section that we're going to talk about is past life regression. And I want to, using hypnosis to clear trauma. I do want to say past life regression is not something that I specialize in. I'm familiar with it, but it isn't something I specialize in. I do more, as I said, with the hypnosis specific trauma, and then I'm also certified in EMDR. But looking at the hypnosis specifically for PTSD, looking at the past life regression, and looking at the EMDR, you're going to see common themes that interweave all these three components together. And it's an interesting methodology. So past life regression in hypnosis is based on the theory that the soul is made up of conscious energy that does not die when the physical body expires. Upon death, the soul releases itself from the physical body and rises into a higher dimension, sometimes referred to as the afterlife or spirit world. After a time in the afterlife, the soul chooses another physical body to reincarnate into. Many times, a past life regression experience is sought for curiosity purposes only. However, there is a deep spiritual meaning in each experience, as well as opportunities to become aware of one's soul's consciousness, the pain and struggles the soul has experienced which remain unresolved, and therefore have been carried over into the current life. A past life regression session gives the explorer insight and understanding of the patterns that are being repeated lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. A skilled past life facilitator will be able to assist the explorer to resolve the emotional challenges behind these patterns, so the patterns can be dissolved. The purpose of repeating the pattern is to finish what was started, to bring matters to a close. When matters remain unresolved, soul consciousness creates similar situations to bring opportunity to fully resolve and bring closure to the original issue. So essentially, what's being suggested is until you resolve the trauma that occurred in a previous life, your soul will continually get you into experiences or situations that are going to be linked to that trauma. So it's an interesting component that you're going to keep reliving past life experiences until you effectively resolve them in the present. Past life traumas with deep emotional impact may require several sessions to fully heal from the experiences. If the trauma is not completely healed, the residual pain will continue to disrupt the soul's evolution. And with that, it's interesting because we go back to what we just spoke about with PTSD and talking about trauma getting stuck in the amygdala. And then, as we just spoke about on those different sections, it will continue until you process through. With a skilled past life regression facilitator, past life regression is a healing and enlightening experience. Our minds have a built-in protection mechanism which allows the process to be safe and gentle experience for the explorer. Anything that the mind believes it cannot handle, it will not bring forth. If your experiences feel like a difficult trauma exploration of the past, it is because you are ready to acknowledge it and bring it into resolution. Again, I always say, look for the expert in the field. If you're thinking about doing past life regression, you want to find somebody that is experienced in providing it. You want to check reviews and make sure they know what they're doing, because again, it could be a traumatic event that you're bringing up, whether it be from a past life or whether it be something unresolved from your current life that is trying to be processed through. Sometimes healing needs to take place in stages and increments because this is how the mind feels most comfortable in the healing process. A deep traumatic experience cannot be healed and released easily and quickly if the mind is not ready to acknowledge it and release it all at once. Patience is important when working through past life experiences that are affecting your current life. There are many, many layers and layers to work through and many emotions to be processed. However, with each experience, valuable insight about oneself is discovered and can only enhance the intelligence of the mind and deepen one's spiritual wisdom. It's important for you to commit to your own healing process and be patient with the unfolding of past life events and circumstances that affect your current life. There may be many lifetimes to explore in order to completely heal and release the emotional traumas behind these events and circumstances. Again, if this is something that you believe in and feel strongly about, you may have multiple lifetimes of trauma as this trauma has reset itself time and time again because your soul has tried to resolve it and it just hasn't been resolved. So you may have experienced the same type of trauma over tens, 20s, or hundreds of lifetimes. Past life regression therapy is one of the most powerful modalities in alternative healing. What's important to understand is that you do not need to believe in reincarnation to have a profound healing experience. When someone explores a past life through regression techniques, a story will unfold that is what the explorer is emotionally and sometimes physically challenged within their current life. This may cause the explorer to believe the story was fabricated. However, whether the story was fabricated as a fantasy or metaphor to explain one's current consciousness, or whatever it comes from a true past life experience, a qualified practitioner will be able to assist the explorer in resolving whatever traumas arise from the experience, thereby allowing healing to take place. Going back to the idea of a metaphor, the reason metaphors are important is because in hypnosis, it is believed that the subconscious mind uses metaphors consistently. And this is where it could be coming in as an element of trauma trying to be processed through the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind utilizing the formulation of a metaphor to help that, or to be the initial part of that trauma resolution. And until that metaphor is understood and interpreted by the higher levels of the brain, the trauma will remain within. Another interesting point is that scientific studies have shown evidence that we carry the memories of our ancestors. If we are carrying memories in our unconscious mind from trauma that was experienced by our ancestors, possibly we are recalling memories of ancestors through our own unconscious mind. And this is something that has been found to be completely 100% true. And it's even on the, I believe it's even within the genetic strands. So in terms of trauma coming from previous generations, this is where the past life piece could be, for myself, more explainable, in that, you know, in our subconscious minds, we're holding memory of previous generations, and those traumas definitely imprint upon the mind and upon the body. So if those previous generations did not resolve those traumas, it just goes to say, we're, you know, as we're having our children, those traumas from us are being passed on to them again and again and again. Through past life regression work, you would be acting out the ancestors' experience as if it were your own experience, because the unconscious mind believes you are having this experience. Again, no matter where the trauma originated, healing can take place when you work with a qualified facilitator. However your subconscious mind is dealing with the trauma, and whether it is something that's been carried through from the previous generation, as I keep saying, once we bring it out of the darkness and into the light and enable that processing to take place, you should be able to move forward with it, make peace with it, and then continue on with your life. No matter where the memories or stories come from, the past life explorer always has an experience that feels very close to their heart. The emotions feel very real, very personal, and resonate with the feelings of their current life challenges. A past life regression can cause some very deep wounds to surface, and without a qualified past life regression facilitator, it may be difficult to locate and heal the root causes of someone's pain. Past life regression healing has been utilized in helping people heal physical and emotional pain, connect with their inner wisdom, and understand their soul's journey. Past life regression experience can help you make a clearer, more insightful choice during your incarnation on Earth and help you evolve as a soul. So the last part of the presentation, I want to leave questions to the end, and I'll be happy to answer the questions that you have, is in relation to eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, also known as EMDR. This modality has become more and more popular probably over the last 20 years, but it gained a lot more support, especially after the wars in the Middle East, and then, you know, such tragedies that occurred, such as Sandy Hook, because the modality allows for rapid deployment. You don't need a lot of equipment. In fact, the only thing you really need to provide this type of support alongside the extensive training is simply your fingers, in terms of moving back and forth in front of the individual's eyes in a certain way to activate the bilateral part of the brain. I do want to state that in terms of brain functioning, there used to be this idea of left brain, right brain, creative thinking, more analytical thinking. As time has gone on, it's become realized that the left side of the brain, right side of the brain argument kind of doesn't ring true. Functioning within the brain is conducted throughout the brain. Throughout the brain, in different regions of the brain, there are creative elements, there are analytical elements. There really isn't the left side, right side argument anymore. Although EMDR does preach a lot about bilateral stimulation, what it really is talking about is the full actualization of the brain and making sure that the entire brain network is functioning while we assist in the process through the trauma. So in terms of EMDR and the benefit for overcoming trauma, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing is an extensively researched, effective method proven to help people recover from trauma and other distressing life experiences, including PTSD, anxiety, depression, near-death experiences, and panic disorder. As you can see on the screen, there are a number of very, very reputable organizations that have endorsed and recognized EMDR therapy as an effective treatment option. And that list continues to grow year upon year upon year. And more and more people are assisted with it. How is EMDR therapy different from other support options? EMDR does not require an individual to talk in detail about the distressing issues or completing homework between sessions, which is more traditional with talk-based therapies. When you go to a talk-based therapist, you're typically in those sessions for weeks, if not months. And so, unfortunately, some people are in there for years because you're looking, that therapist is looking to identify very, very specific information that you may not even be consciously aware of in order to help you get to the root cause of what's causing the problems within your life. EMDR, rather than focusing on changing the emotions, thoughts, or behaviors resulting from the distressing issues, allows the brain to resume its natural healing process. EMDR is designed to resolve unprocessed traumatic memories in the brain. For many individuals, EMDR can be completed in fewer sessions than other support options. I personally incorporate EMDR into a lot of the work that I do, just because I believe it's far quicker to get to the root causes of problems. Also, it enables the individual to completely control their session, or the individual's brain and subconscious, I should say. So with the EMDR process, that it's a very different situation than, as we go back to the talk therapy. You're not sitting there having to work on rapport and really identifying like how the session is going to work. Essentially, we have a breakdown or a method to use, but it's a script, and there are different scripts for different problems that you would come in, or scripts or protocols. There are different protocols for different problems that you're going to come in with, and we just simply follow those protocols. Your brain does the work. In terms of the processing, as I said, it's bilateral stimulation. So it can be as simple as myself holding up 2 fingers in front of your eyes and gently going across left to right and varying the speeds of that bilateral stimulation. There are a couple of other different ways of doing it. There's a light bar technique, which if anybody watched Knight Rider in the 80s, it looked like Kit and the red light flashing back and forth, albeit it's a green light now and it's on the light bar. But those different methods activate the brain and the different regions of the brain. And essentially what happens is we get you to focus in on a traumatic event and a negative self-belief associated with that traumatic event. And then we provide the bilateral stimulation, and your brain goes where it needs to go. It takes you to weird, as I do sessions, we get taken to weird and wonderful places in terms of your memory, and things come up that you don't even remember. I mean, they come from childhood, but what typically occurs is there's very common themes that come up, and it's a repetition of the bilateral stimulation with the individual providing a little bit of information about what they're experiencing or seeing. Sometimes it can even be they're feeling a sensation in their body. Trauma can get trapped in the body and it releases as you're doing this process. For a skilled practitioner of this type of support option, what also occurs is we get to see the negative belief and how it's clouding the way that you're thinking. If the belief is coming from the amygdala, it's that fight, flight, or freeze. And if you have the trauma as a 12-year-old or even under that age, what EMDR believes or suggests is that the trauma can get stuck there. So every time you experience a similar trauma, even if you're in your 50s, 60s, or 70s, you still experience it and react to it as you would have done as that 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old. So you don't employ the tools and memories and learning that you've accumulated over the years because you're still acting as that individual in that moment. So essentially what EMDR does is look to free up and release that trauma from the more primeval regions of the brain and pull it forward for processing. And the skilled clinician will help challenge the way that you are currently thinking those beliefs and have you look at them in a very, very different way. Also, in terms of the speed in which the processing occurs, I've worked with individuals who, in one case, the young lady that I worked with, her father had committed suicide and with a shotgun. She was 14 at the time, and the memory that she had was being at the end of her driveway and the police not allowing her to go into the home, and the anger that she felt at that point. And she was struggling with anger in her professional career. It was clouding her ability to work with others. So we did the sessions, and I was able, she was able with this methodology to clear this memory up and to move forward in 5 sessions. Now, if you're talking to a talk therapist, they're going to sit there and going to struggle. I think even Sigmund Freud would probably struggle with 5 sessions to get to there. And this is not that I'm some amazing therapist. It's not the case. I'm good. I'm not that good. It's in relation to the actual method, enabling her to clear through what she needed to quickly and appropriately, because it wasn't about us sitting there talking back and forth and digging. It was about her brain releasing what it needed to release and taking her to the places that she'd forgotten about, only for short bursts of time, and then moving on to the next place. The way to explain it is, it's almost as though you're sitting on a train and looking out the window. So you're detached from the memories, the sounds, the visions, etc., and you're able to process through. Also, there is no homework. When the sessions end, you continue processing through until the next session. It goes on subconsciously. And that also is a huge benefit. Skip the slide. So how does EMDR affect the brain? Our brains have natural ways to recover from traumatic memories and events, such as near-death experiences. The process involves communication between the amygdala, which is the old part, reptilian part of the brain, the alarm signal for stressful events, the hippocampus, which assists with learning, including memories about safety and danger, and the prefrontal cortex, which analyzes and controls behaviors and emotion. While many times traumatic experiences can be managed by resolved spontaneously, they may not be processed without help. Stress responses are part of our natural flight, fight, or freeze instincts. When distress from the disturbing event remains, the upsetting images, thoughts, and emotions may create feelings of being overwhelmed, of being back in the moment, or of being frozen in time. EMDR assists the brains to process these memories and allows normal healing to resume. The experience is still remembered. Fight, flight, or freeze response from the original event is resolved. So even for myself, I actually went through EMDR. I've had a couple of near-death experiences. The first one was when I was young, probably around about 12. I came very close to being involved in a car accident. It was actually, I was supposed to cross the road, go visit a friend's house, and I chose to go to another friend's house instead. And one of the young gentlemen that was with me decided to cross the road anyway. less than a minute later, we heard a loud bang, looked across, and unfortunately that individual had been struck by a drunk driver on the zebra crossing that we have in England. If I'd have been on that crossing with him, I may have died. Unfortunately, he passed away. So that memory of that young man stayed with me up until my first EMDR session, or my first grouping of EMDR sessions, which you have to go through as part of the process of training. And that helped clear that up. I no longer think about it. I no longer have the vivid images or memories of it. The second NDE that I experienced myself, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time in England. Unfortunately, I was a victim of a pretty savage attack. I got hit with a crowbar on a construction bar, and 11 guys jumped me. I said I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was a completely unprovoked attack. And, you know, EMDR helped me process through that event after it happened. And fortunately, at the time, I also processed through it and looked at it in a way where it was a positive, because it changed the direction of my life anyway. It took me to where I am today in terms of the work that I do, and leaving England and actually coming to the USA to study. So it made a very, very different trajectory of my life. But that's what we go back to. If a traumatic event happens, it's all about the way that you process it in that moment in time. If you're able to process it in that moment in time as it's happening, or shortly after, as a potential positive event, then the development of PTSD is far less likely. If you're unable to, that's when the PTSD really, really begins to kick in, because it gets stuck in the amygdala. Because by essence, a traumatic event, a near-death experience, puts you in those moments in time, first and foremost, in the reptilian part of your brain, the fight, flight, or freeze. And if you never move beyond that, that's when it impacts you. That's when it becomes problematic. So that's, as I said, that's something to think about. And then we go to questions, I believe. Yes, so I can stop sharing at this point and come back. So does anybody have any questions?
Okay, I finally found my microphone. This is Jack.
Hi, Jack.
Jamie, first of all, thank you. That was
You're welcome.
very interesting information, and helping us understand, you know, the extent that hypnosis can actually modify our condition. And one of the things that I wanted to ask is, you know, in hypnosis, you're dealing with the mind and thoughts and experiences, but with self hypnosis, is it possible for someone to stimulate their system and direct it through a mental thought to a certain part of the body to help with the recovery? You know, how can hypnosis or self-hypnosis physically modify our condition?
What I would say with self-hypnosis is, I'd always recommend first going to a hypnotist or somebody certified in hypnosis to work with you to develop the skill set and the protocols and parameters that you need to effectively and safely utilize self-hypnosis. Now, you see there's a lot of stuff out there online where you can buy CDs and jump onto YouTube and pieces like that to take these self-hypnosis elements. But as I said, everybody's an individual. Everybody has their own nuances. So to go to a certified hypnotist first to talk about those and identify exactly what you need would be the most important. I want to put that in place. But then with self-hypnosis, if you have trauma, if there's pain within the body that you're dealing with, there are ways to use self-hypnosis. There's some guided imagery techniques. There's some very, very, they're not difficult techniques to use, which can help you relocate pain to different parts of the body. Now, if you're struggling, let's say you're an individual that survived cancer or something of that nature, and there was some type of medical intervention that has left residual pain. There's an ability within the body to transform that pain to a different area. So let's say it was a breast augmentation and you're still feeling pain around that area. Well, hypnosis can enable that pain, or enable you to control that pain and move it to the tip of your finger. There's many different elements. The truth is, we don't understand the full potential or the power of the brain anyway. Nobody does. If they did, Elon Musk would be probably selling a lot more product at this point. But it's definitely has the potential. You have the potential to self-heal in terms of mental pain. I'm not going to say don't go to the doctor or anything of that nature, but in terms of, as you were saying, something that was internal to you, that there was pain or discomfort, self-hypnosis can take you and help you control that self-discomfort.
Okay, well, I'm interested in having a better understanding of how our brains can self-hypnosis, whatever you call it, to affect our body. For example, years ago when I first got interested in hypnosis, I found a medical book, and it was it was a long time ago. Anyway, the thing is that one of the examples really startled me. There was a man who took his thumb and first finger and held it together, and he through hypnosis, self-hypnosis, those two fingers grew together, and they had to be separated surgically. Now, this is in a medical book. It's not,
Yeah.
and so I was fascinated by what the mind can do to our bodies, and so
I was going to say, the mind has amazing potential. There's a gentleman called Wim Hof. He's a Dutch gentleman, W-I-M, and then Hof, H-O-F-F. He's on YouTube, and there's a huge amount of media around him, who utilizes, it's actually a breathing technique, and it's a meditation technique to control the circulatory system and to control the body's reaction to illnesses and viruses. And even the body's reaction to sub-zero temperatures. And he's known as the Iceman. So he's climbed different mountains in nothing but his underwear, and so he has a whole group of followers. But he's essentially using his mind and different breathing techniques to gain a higher level of control over his body. So that, and you go throughout history, Tai Chi, the Buddhist monks, all these different elements have been using different techniques to have better control of the body. Hypnosis was used extensively within the medical field prior to the invention of ether as a pain management technique. So it's definitely something that can be used in certain areas. Would I say to use hypnosis rather than going to the doctor? No. Would I say to stop all medications and call me and use my services once a week? No. I would say there's got to be some balance to it. But anything that you can do to take control over your mind, and in terms of ordering your state of mind, is important, because if you can be in a calmer, more relaxed state of mind, that's beneficial to the body overall. Because if you're constantly in a state of fear or flight, fight, or freeze, that's going to be detrimental to your body. It's going to be detrimental to your mind.
Okay.
And that, over the long term, that's going to impact your heart, that's going to impact your regulatory system, because at some level, you're always ready to have a fight or to run. That's not good for you in any way, shape, or form.
Well, okay, but I mean, you know, you also help people who are having issues with their weight, they're obese, and they, you know, you help them learn how to redirect their thinking. I don't know how it works, but or smoking. You know, those are two things that many people have difficulty controlling through, you know, just self discipline. So that's, those to me are other examples of the mind over the body, or
Even the mind over the brain, and that you think the two are linked, but the brain is inherently lazy. That's the way you've got to think about it. Your brain is lazy. It takes in, you take in so many calories a day, and your brain is overseeing the use of those calories. So for you to come up with, to be consciously aware of everything that's going on in your environment at all times, that takes up a lot of energy across the course of the day, and the brain would rather use that energy for making sure that it's regulating the beat of your heart, or making sure that you're taking in oxygen. So what happens is with smoking or with overeating, it's simply the brain is on autopilot, and what happens is you develop a response to specific triggers that is unhealthy. And because that response is developed and sets in over a 90-day period, it just becomes automatic. There isn't a baby on the planet that has been born with, when it cries, it wants chocolate. Nobody's born that way. Or when they get stressed, they need a cigarette. No baby or child is that way. It's as they get older and as they develop, certain things are put into their mind, whereas, you know, it may be the child falls over and cuts their knee. So mum gives them a bar of chocolate or a piece of chocolate as a reward to come and let's wipe the tears away. Let's make you feel better. Sugar is a treat. And then with the smoking, I'm going to avoid doing something that I'm uncomfortable with. I'm going to not think about it. I'm going to put the cigarettes in my mouth. All of a sudden, you get that hit of nicotine. It's a reward base for stress. So all of a sudden, you're getting rewarded for stress. So what hypnosis does is, it's not a magic bullet, and I say that to everybody. It doesn't stop you in your tracks. What it does is, for a split second in time, it's like that click of a finger. It gives you a moment to make a decision. It gives you a moment to say, I'm going to go and eat that bar of chocolate, or I'm not. It stops you from doing that. It makes you realize that I'm doing something automatically, and I need not to. I need to be conscious and aware in this moment in time. That's what hypnosis does. We can, you know, I do include food aversion and taste aversion. So making the cigarette taste like the worst tasting thing that you can imagine in the world, or making the smell of smoke nauseating. In terms of food, making chocolate just the most disgusting thing you could ever think of. And then we've got some visualization things that are, you know, imagining yourself, you know, for people that struggle with the sugary stuff. In the state of hypnosis, in the state of trance, I get to work with you to guide the imagery that you're creating in your mind. So imagine yourself sitting at the head of, you know, King Arthur's dining table, and it's full of all your sweet treats. All of a sudden, I start making the smell of those sweet treats change from donuts and candies and sugar to the smell of rotting raw liver. And as you start looking at the donuts, you start seeing there's maggots crawling out of the donuts. And now I want you to take a bite of that donut, and I want you to feel the maggots crawling around in your mouth. I guarantee the next time you go to pick up a donut, you're going to be thinking about what I've just put in place, and you're not going to want to take a bite of the donut. Now, it will work for a period of time. That's all I need it to do. I need it to work for 90 days. Over a 90-day period, you can put down new neurological pathways, and that's what we're talking about. The brain is plastic in nature. So just because you have a problematic belief today doesn't mean you need to have a problematic belief tomorrow. that's why I always say, continue reading, continue surrounding yourself with good thoughts, good, especially at this moment in time with all the negativity coming through the media. You need to be aware of what you're taking in, because these things influence you on a subconscious level each and every day. So you need to kind of have a balance of things, because otherwise, all that negativity does impact you.
Okay, well, yeah, I can see how mind can actions that you like creating imagery that turns you off, etc.
Yeah.
But okay, but can the mind, I think, hypnosis, or is it just a deep meditation, or are they both? But can the mind actually stimulate a part of your body, like your immune system, to activate it and help in the recovery from an illness or whatever?
Yeah, I believe the mind has the ability to do that. I believe. No, as I said, if I direct you to look at some of the information and some of the studies around the techniques that Wim Hof is using at this moment in time in terms of their immunity system and the way the body reacts to illness. We know we probably know more about space than we do our own brains. So, and we only use a small percentage of the brain. So I definitely believe that the mind plays a big role in this. Just as we were saying about PTSD a little while ago, if you're constantly in a state of fight, flight, or fear, that's going to have a reaction to you. That's going to have a physiological reaction in your body. If you have the ability to control that, if you're doing mindfulness exercises every day, if you're adjusting your breathing, if you're feeling in control of yourself, that all has a benefit to you. And hypnosis, if you look at, again, we go back to Buddhism and these more ancient, even the sweat lodges of the Native Americans, you can pick up elements of what hypnosis essentially is throughout older cultures that were in place long before what we have in modern times. And they all used elements of what we would class as hypnosis now as part of those ritualistic behaviors. And that helped them. I mean, they didn't get wiped off the face of the planet. They were still floating around. And a lot of people would say they were probably happier then than they are today, as we are today, I should say. But I honestly believe that we are an over-medicated group of people or a society and culture. I think a lot of the times we would rather a quick fix or even potentially a placebo fix than doing the work needed ourselves to help us move forward in a healthy and appropriate way.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, I hate to belabor the medical aspect of hypnosis, but there's this very well-noted case. I forgot what the name of the hospital is in Minneapolis. A patient was going to have some internal an operation that required opening her stomach, and I forgot what specifically the problem was. And she worked with the doctor, the surgeon, and they spent a lot of time together and he was giving her a lot of suggestions, and he actually was able to help her not feel any pain.
Yep, there's a technique.
And inspiration, and the only time she felt any pain was when the surgeon had to do something that was outside of the process that they had discussed.
Yeah.
And then they sewed her up and she was fine.
Yeah.
But, I mean, how does that happen?
There's a technique called the Glove of Anesthesia, and that's essentially what he used. Where
I'm sorry, could you say that again, please?
a technique called the Glove of Anesthesia. That's what it's classed. That's what it's called. The Glove of Anesthesia.
Oh, okay.
And it, again, the truth is with hypnosis, there isn't a full understanding of how it actually works in the brain. There really isn't. There's been little bits and pieces done, but what it does in terms of the Glove of Anesthesia is it takes away all feelings of pain in terms of a specific location in the body. And as I said earlier on, prior to the invention of ether,
Yes.
hypnosis was used in the operating room and by dentists all across the country and the world.
That's true.
Means of pain control.
Okay.
And even in my own training, I was taught the Glove of Anesthesia, and it works. I mean, there's no way of fully identifying how exactly it works, but there's even case studies of hypnotists slowing the beating of the heart and the blood flow within a body of somebody that was worried about bleeding out and stuff like that. So there's all these different elements, which is mind over matter essentially, and this is how it works. The brain is an amazing thing. I mean, and it essentially, with that Glove of Anesthesia, it dulls the receptors in the brain to pain. It stops you feeling pain for a period of time while you're in that hypnotic state.
Okay. Well, I recall years ago, one of the NDEers had described being in an automobile accident.
Yeah.
The medics came and he had broken bones and all sorts of, he was bleeding, etc. And they said, well, where does it hurt? And he said, well, I don't know. He says, I turned off my pain receptors. I don't feel any pain. And they said, well, you're going to have to turn it off so we can find out, what there is to be repaired. So here's the mind is so incredibly powerful. Now, I don't know if this was, I think he said that, he practiced self-hypnosis.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm sorry. I'm kind of belated.
He had a technique. He's practiced self-hypnosis, and it was changing how his mind was functioning to do that. We all have, plus he was in, you're in a life or death situation. The amygdala took over to an extent, and that older part of the brain took over and helped him get through it. The brain is an amazing thing. I've worked in the traumatic brain injury field for 10 years. I learn new things each and every day from the individuals that I help support.
Okay.
And you see individuals that should never have survived what they went through, functioning and doing what they need to do. I've seen people with half of their brain removed, living normal functional lives, where you're sitting there just scratching your head going, how is this possible? But that one half of the brain is doing what they need to do to live a normal functional life.
Oh, that's very impressive. Wow. Well, okay. So is it possible for a hypnotist such as yourself to train me to be able to exercise self-hypnosis, and with the right suggestion or direction or whatever, to help? Well, you help people stop smoking. You help people stop eating. I mean, you're kind of teaching them self-hypnosis, aren't you?
Yeah, to some extent. As I said earlier on, you engage in self-hypnosis every day of your life. When you're taking that journey in your car each and every day, and sometimes you get to the end of the road or your end of your journey and you don't remember how you got there. It's self-hypnosis. When you're reading a good book and you lose track of time, self-hypnosis. When you're sitting in front of the TV with a bowl of popcorn and the movie starts, and then you get to the end of the movie and you don't remember eating the whole bowl of popcorn on your own, self-hypnosis. You're able to do self-hypnosis with the right training. And this is the other thing. You can go and be trained in hypnosis, and then it's about you know, you can, somebody says you can be a mile wide and an inch deep in terms of your expertise, and that you know a whole lot about a whole lot of things, but not too much about one single thing. Or you can be an inch wide and a mile deep. So if you wanted to specialize in that self-hypnosis piece, that's something you could do a ton of research on and really become an expert in that.
Okay.
Self-hypnosis, as I said, it's all about blending. I think it's about blending in some of the, you know, the mindfulness exercises, some of the, as I said, if we look back at the Tibetan methods of breathing and Tai Chi and all these different elements, that's all forms of self-hypnosis. Even yoga is a form of self-hypnosis because the state of mind it gets you in. That would be, even with the yoga element, you're changing your state of mind to be able to get into poses that you couldn't get into a few weeks before or a few months before.
Okay. Well, now what about theatrical presentation of a hypnotist able to bring people up from the audience and make them feel all these different things, positive, negative, you know, and feeling cold or feeling hot, and doing it with a number of people at the same time. I went to one, and halfway through the performance, he said, you know, for those of you who have, who I ask you to come here from a previous presentation he had made, these people had it in their memory, and they actually did not remember why they came there, but they came because he had seated them with a thought in their subconscious.
Yeah. So, I mean, with stage shows, hypnosis is kind of a bell curve. So there's the clinical hypnosis, and then you've got your stage shows, at two ends of the bell curve. I'm not a stage show person. It's just not my cup of tea. But not to say it's not got its place. So with the stage show element, I'm going to let you into a secret. It's being recorded. But so with the stage show element, what happens is typically the people that are brought up are the most suggestible individuals in the audience. There are certain tests that can be done, suggestibility tests that can be done to identify those who are most suggestible. And typically at the start of the show, or as they're going, they bring a whole crowd up, they do a few suggestibility tests, and certain people are sent back to their seat.
Okay.
The other thing that goes on is the people that go up there and are suggestible also kind of have the personalities that make them very good subjects.
Okay, yeah.
Everybody can be hypnotized. This is the piece. And everybody of normal and above intelligence can be hypnotized. I found even people with brain injuries can be hypnotized. It just depends on the hypnosis that you attempt to utilize.
Okay.
So in terms of feeling hot, feeling cold, it's all suggestions. But the reason you buy a specific brand of chocolate or a specific vehicle is because a very expensive advertising campaign gave you suggestions and you didn't even realize it. Even when you walk into the car dealership, the position of the car and the language that is used in the advertising is all suggestions. The scary thing is now with social media, you've had teams of highly educated individuals work on those platforms in order to give you the suggestions that they need you to give you.
Well, you know, this embedded suggestions, etc.
Yeah.
I recall years ago in advertising where where the agency would have a commercial, and there would be a fraction of a second message that was embedded in that commercial. And they were actually embedding ideas like go buy this kind of chocolate or whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, even with the movie theaters, back when movie theaters were very popular, they used to have the intermission.
Oh, yes.
Just before the intermission, they used to send the smell of popcorn, hot dogs, and things through the movie theaters, and then there would be an advertisement concerning concessions.
Yeah.
So everybody would rush out to go buy what they needed to buy. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Well, okay. I'm sorry. I kind of monopolized your time.
No problem.
The other members, do you have any?
Yes, Jack. Jamie, thank you for doing this. My question is this: if you can recall, have you ever worked with a client that actually died and then came back into the body? That's what's a near-death experience.
Yeah, I have. I've worked with individuals that have died, who believe they have died and come back into the body. I mean, I've worked with individuals that have been in, especially in the brain injury field, that have been in comas for extended periods of time, where, for all intents and purposes, they had passed. I mean, there was that coma scale was on the floor, and there was decisions being made whether to turn the machine off or turn it back on again. And I've worked with a lot of individuals such as that who have come through those situations.
Okay. Well, I'm asking because a lot of times what happens is people that say near-death experiences, it's like they almost died, but not necessarily, which is not the explanation the International Association of Near-Death Experiences gives. In my case, my last one, I had 3. My last one, I actually died at a car crash. I actually felt my soul like sucking out of my body, and went up someplace. Well, it's all in my book, anyways. But and then when it came back into my body, I actually felt that suction feeling again when it went into my body again.
It's interesting you say that because in the past,
I'm sorry. Say that again.
It's interesting that you said that because in the past life regression element what I spoke about, it talks about the soul leaving the body and going to the spirit world, and making a decision when to come back and be reincarnated. So there's some elements there, for sure.
It was an interesting feeling.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
Yeah. So how are people that have had near-death experiences different than other traumatic people that you're dealing with?
I think one of the key pieces that's put into place is individuals that have had near-death experiences, as your group identifies them, have developed the framework of their experience. So you've classified that event as a near-death experience, and there's some there's positive elements around that whole. You made a choice. You came back, and you went back into your body, and you survived.
Yeah.
Whereas for those individuals that haven't got an explanatory framework around their experience, it becomes locked in the amygdala in terms of being in. So that individual, therefore, is then stuck in the fear and the not understanding of the experience. And then they need help to move forward, to be able to move forward. And that's an interesting piece. A lot of the time, it really does come down to the explanatory framework that you put together around the experience, and that determines how you move forward.
Yeah. One thing that stands out a lot with people that have had near-death experience is that there's no longer a fear of death.
100%. Because you know where you're going. You've developed that framework. You know where you're going, so therefore the fear of death is removed. For an individual that doesn't develop the framework, they're still in that what's happening to me? Where am I going to go? I don't have any control. So that's where we try and help them gain a sense of control.
Yeah. Thank you, Jamie.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
I think we're good.
Any more questions?
Jamie,
Yes.
I just want to say that you're a blessing. It's really terrific, everything you said. And I wish I had known your knowledge 50 years ago, but I reflect what you're saying about meditating and following your breath and listening to your body. And the spontaneousness is a big help for me to be able to see my consciousness, but then just observe it and look at it. But compassionately, it's so wonderful what you're doing, because I had to do baby steps. Even now, it's a struggle to be able to process and work with it and get to know and understand it and comprehend it and see the changes and see the healing and everything. But a lot of people are not able to be there. So you're a real blessing. Thank you.
That's very kind of you to say, Lou. Thank you. I think as long as you're taking one step ahead of the other each and every day, moving forward rather than backwards, you're on the right path. That's how you got to think about things.
Okay. Any other questions? I wondered if, just one last thing, could you give an example of a major modification that you were able to make in a person through hypnosis?
Well, I think more than hypnosis, in terms of the Emdr piece, the eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which kind of works on the same principle as hypnosis, but is far quicker. As I said, I gave the example of the young lady who lost her father to a suicide, and in terms of the anger that she carried with her because of that. With that, in less than 5 sessions, she was able to move forward with her life, and the anger had gone because it had been stuck with her from that time when she was 13, trying to get beyond the police barrier that was at the end of her driveway. That's the memory that was imprinted upon her amygdala, essentially, and the anger of trying to get in because all she wanted to see was her father. So from that point on, any time she felt challenged, even as an adult, by anybody in a position of authority, whether it was her boss or somebody in the community, and she was, she's a successful, she works in the real estate market and is successful in that, but she always had to deal with trying to control and manage this anger. So that's probably been one of my, with the EMDR, those are my main, I think those are my proudest achievements, because they've been so quick and the change has been so monumental, so fast for those individuals. In terms of the hypnosis, typically it takes longer because you've got to be guiding the individual through the scenarios. But I mean, I've had similar individuals that have come to me with traumatic events in the past that they've looked to clear up. Interestingly enough, a lot of individuals in terms of relationship breakdowns or the losses of partners, and that memory being there with them, even in terms of when a partner has passed and they're not being able to move forward. So taking hypnosis and, as I said, imagining that movie screen scenario that I spoke about and allowing there to be some detachment from it, but allowing the individual to say goodbye because they didn't get an opportunity to say goodbye when it happened. So I've done that for a few people, and that's been hugely beneficial to them.
Well, taking that example of that young lady who had this built up because her father committed suicide, and you said in 5 sessions you were able to help her go.
Yeah, in 5 sessions we cleared it through. There was a lot of stuff embedded actually before the actual suicide happened, in terms of there was a problematic childhood, the father, there were some elements in there that we worked through, but the main thing was that the anger dissipated and we were able to challenge the way that she was thinking, because that's essentially what we're trying to do. You're taking the trauma out of the limbic system, where the limbic system doesn't have the ability to process through things. If you can move it forward to the frontal lobe and enable processing to take place, it clears up. So that's, you know, with EMDR, that's what they used with the Sandy Hook families and survivors, because it enabled them to move forward. Even with 9/11, that just, you know, we just recently passed 9/11, they were using it there. It was very young and in its infancy there, but it was being used there to help family members and survivors move forward. And there's EMD, which is eye movement desensitization, which is one element of it, which if you have a traumatic event, it can work on that. And then there's the reprocessing part that's added on, where you actually get to change the negative self-belief.
Okay. All right. Well, that's really very interesting and very promising. Could you explain how, you know, if someone wanted to modify a behavior they have, and they come to someone like you, how are they? How do they compensate the hypnotist?
Through bags of gold? No. Typically they compensate the hypnotist. There should be, before you go and actually sit down with the hypnotist, there should be a communication about, okay, these are the rates that they charge, and this is how many sessions they believe that it can be worked in. There shouldn't be a huge amount of sessions. And that's the truth. Anybody that's saying they need 10 sessions with somebody, they're just, I don't see why it should take 10 sessions personally to help a person move forward. Typically, it should be focused in, and you work with the individual to help them and assist them move forward in the moment. So you would reach out to the hypnotist, make sure that they're certified, make sure that they are experienced in what you're looking for specifically. And if they're certified, they should have the ethics to say, this isn't something that I have a lot of experience in, but here's one of my colleagues in the area that is, and refer over. And then you identify what the price point is. Typically, this wouldn't be an individual session to get through. I think it takes more than one session. You'd probably be between 1 to 5 sessions. And there would be a price point of that. It would probably be a package that would be offered. I'm going to do 5 sessions, because I wouldn't want to open up Pandora's box, so to say, and not have you come back for follow-up sessions to get that box closed and get you in the right mindset. It's also important for you to go and meet the individual and feel that you trust the individual and that you build rapport with them as well. There's got to be an element of trust and rapport for you to work effectively with them.
Okay.
And that's a big element. With this type of thing as well, you want to make sure that the individual is completely reputable. So if they've got references, always check online to see what other people are writing about them. If they only have a 1-star review, you might want to avoid them and look for somebody a little bit better. Again, you can go to the National Guild of Hypnotists website, and there's all the credentialed individuals that are on there in your area.
What is the name of that again? National Hypnotist what?
The National Guild of Hypnotists, the NGH. So you can go on there, and there's also for EMDR, there's an organization called Emdr, EMDRI for ice and A, Emdr. And they are actually an international organization that will give you the list of practitioners in your area. And with both hypnosis and EMDR, you have to go through a certification process. So that you want to be going to people that are certified, that have, ethical expectations, and there's individuals that oversee them. For the National Guild of Hypnotists, I have to conduct continuing education every year in order to remain a certified member. With EMDR, I go to ongoing trainings as well.
Okay. So are there standard rates for sessions?
Unfortunately, they're not. There aren't standard rates. Different people charge different rates. Personally, myself, I have my rates on my website, but then I also offer, I have a sliding scale. I think services should be accessible to everybody. If somebody, needs help and they can't afford to go to the guy down the street, then I think I should be able to try and help them in a way that's possible. So there always has to be, I always say, in terms of private practice, there always has to be some exchange for you to put in the work that you need to put in.
Yes. Okay.
I think there needs to be some exchange that goes on, but it shouldn't be an exchange to a level where you can't afford to put food on the table.
Okay.
We're in the profession to help people. I didn't get into this profession to make a ton of money. It was, I think it's important to give back, and the universe has looked after me that I'm in a place where I'm comfortable. So if I can help somebody else become comfortable in terms of moving forward after a trauma, or moving forward in their life because they've got weight control issues, or they've got self-confidence concerns, or they need mind coaching, then I should be able to do that for a fair fee.
Okay. And is it possible to have a session by telephone instead of in person?
Yeah, at the moment, due to COVID, all of my sessions, even EMDR, is taking place via a situation very much like this, in terms of using Google Meets or Zoom or one of those platforms to have the session. With a hypnosis session, you just want to be in a comfortable, quiet place where you're not going to be distracted, and you've got good sound. And apart from that, you're good to go. Because if you can remember, probably when you were growing up, there used to be those hypnosis tapes you could buy on the back of magazines, and you could pay like $5.99 and get and these tapes would just arrive. So there is no, as long as you can hear my voice, I can hypnotize you, because it's just the power of suggestion. That's essentially what hypnosis is. I get you into a certain mindset that is completely relaxed, completely at ease, and it opens up my ability to communicate directly to your subconscious mind.
Okay.
In terms of the EMDR and bilateral stimulation, they develop protocols specific to the pandemic. So for the bilateral stimulation, they do something called a butterfly tap. So essentially you cross your hands over like this, and I would watch you do the tap side to side, and that you would close your eyes and the bilateral stimulation would occur. I would then work with you to see how you were accessing and processing the information, and potentially have you speed up or slow down those taps to get you to access more quickly or more appropriately. But all these methods work in terms of we don't have to be in the same room together, because it's a concern at this moment in time.
Yes, that's why I asked. I have a cousin that has, and he expresses a desire to get it under control and lose 100 pounds, but it's been difficult. And I've mentioned hypnosis as a possibility, and knowing that it might be able to be done by telephone, it might be possible for him. So I'll talk to him about that.
Telephone or online, in terms of a computer. I always like to see the person. I'm classically trained in terms of psychology, so I like to see the person. I believe it's important to see the person, to see what's going on in terms of their facial expressions, whether there's a physiological reaction, because then I can do what I need to do in terms of redirecting that or changing the course of the session.
I understand. Okay. All right. And I'll talk to him about that. Okay. That's very good. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Well, Jim, you really have been fabulous in your explanation and
Jack, I think somebody is talking. I think it's Deb, but she doesn't realize her sound is not on.
Oh, Beth, you have on your
No,
mic.
Deborah.
Yeah, it's Deb Parker.
Deb. Yeah.
Jamie, I have a question. Somebody who has had multiple trauma issues and they started to fractionalize pictures of those situations. What is the recommended course for that?
There's a few, with hypnosis, there's one formulation for that. And then with EMDR, there's another with hypnosis in terms of fractioning out. That was part of what we were talking about in terms of the way that trauma can impact the individual. So it may be working with you or working with that individual to work through that entire image. So instead of it just remaining just a fracture, we take it for its full and to its full conclusion, one at a time. And we do that through a guided process within hypnosis. And this is why I go back to, it's always important to work with an individual that's working with you one-to-one and working out exactly what those images are, what that fracture is. Because it's probably unprocessed trauma. And you've got so far, and the amygdala doesn't have the capabilities of taking it any farther than that fracture. So therefore, we've got to move it forward. And we go back to that movie screen idea. Under hypnosis, I help you move forward. And we take that fracture and we turn it into images, sounds, visions that are comfortable for you. You can then take that moment in time and weave it into what you need it to be in order to move forward happily and not think about it again. If we went the EMDR route, what would probably happen is, along with that fracture, there would be a negative belief or potentially a negative belief. I would work with you to identify what that negative belief was. We would then work on that fracture and your brain would take you where you needed to go in order to clear that fracture and change the negative belief to a positive belief. So yeah, go ahead.
Would that also work for the triggers? Because if they're subconscious and you really don't know what they are until they pop up, it also works with that also?
Yeah, so with hypnosis, the triggers may come out as we're working along. But again, it comes down to how skilled the individual is that's working with you. In terms of EMDR, the triggers more than likely will come out as we're going through the bilateral stimulation. There will be certain themes that pop up, and we'll look at that. And then so the tapping point at either side as we're going through the motions of EMDR actually clears the triggers or reduces them down. It doesn't wipe the memory completely. It just, let's say it's a full color image that you've got that comes up as the part of that fractured element. What may happen with EMDR is as you try to go back to that memory after a few sessions, it's no longer full color, it's black and white, it's a lot smaller, and it's not something your mind automatically goes to. Triggers are always important because it's important to understand with hypnosis, what I might have you do if you were one of my clients would be to keep a log of any time those fractured images or sounds or something that pop up and identify when the triggers are occurring, like what the triggers are that cause it to pop up. What that does is all of a sudden it gets you thinking in your frontal lobe rather than the amygdala. So you're bringing things forward and process. You're even starting the process at that point. And then once we know what the triggers are, we can then work to desensitize them in the state of hypnosis. So hypnosis is me essentially being your tour guide to your brain. With EMDR, your brain is running it through, and I'm stepping back and just pointing you in the right direction where to go. And if there's something that's really, really off in terms of a self-belief, and it's a negative self-belief, then at the right time, I'm going to challenge that. I'm going to challenge it in an appropriate way. I'm going to challenge it in a way where I say to you, if you were in this situation, you were seeing somebody else having this belief, would you accept it, or would you tell them, to change the way they're thinking and feeling? And once I know more about you, or the individual that I'm working with, I can do that more effectively. And that works very, very well. Essentially, the brain wants to heal. It doesn't want to be in this state. It doesn't want to hold on to these fractured memories. It doesn't want to be stuck in this fight, flight, or freeze. It knows it's not good for it. It just can't move forward. And that's all we're trying to do. For the people that come to me, that's their subconscious trying to get them to move forward.
Right.
Unfortunately, when we hear about people turning to drink, alcohol, drugs, or that's their subconscious maladaptively trying to get them to move forward from the state that they're in currently.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Glad I could help.
Okay, anyone else? Well, once again, very, very much.
You're welcome.
Very helpful. And so I have your card.
You do.
Pass it on to me. And it sounds like a solution for him, and that would be great. Also for NDEers, I did have a question. If through hypnosis, would someone who had an NDE be able to revisit it to perhaps garner some additional details?
Yeah, I would. The way that I would probably utilize or work with that is I would use the same methods that we would use with past life regression, in terms of getting them into that relaxed state of mind and taking them back to that moment in time.
Okay.
The NDE happened. It obviously ensuring that they felt safe in that moment, and then letting them explore it. I mean, the good thing is, in terms of the visualization element, you're able to step outside of what's going on and seeing it in a different way and re-exploring it in a different way.
Okay.
It's the power of your mind, essentially. I'm just, as I said, I'm a tour guide to the best holiday vacation potentially you've ever been on.
Okay. All right. Bethany, did you ask Jamie?
I didn't hear the last part of your question, Jack.
Have you spoken to Jamie about posting this on the website?
Yes, Jamie, do we have your permission to post this on our website?
You have my permission to post it on the website, and I also.
And is it possible to have contact information on that posting, Bethany?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you also have access to all of my slides with my contact information at the back of them as well. I could send that over to Bethany, so she could send that out to you guys.
That's super, Jamie. Thank you.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Enjoy the rest of your evening. It was a pleasure meeting.